With the new Insidious movie out this Friday and me not seeing any of the previous films in this franchise, I decided to go through and check out every one of these movies for the very first time, and honestly, I wish I hadn't. This genuinely might be the worst horror franchise I've experienced to date. I am baffled that we have gotten to 6 of these bad boys, but hey, without much further ado, here are my thoughts on the first 5. Insidious opens up with the Lambert family moving into their new house, a creepy-ass house at that. But not too long into their stay at their new property, one of their children goes to bed one night and doesn't wake up the next morning. With their kids stuck in a coma, the parents are trying to figure out how to navigate their day-to-day life. That is, until they begin to believe that something evil is at play here. Starting out with the positives, Rose Byrne. She carries this movie from beginning to end. She is really great here, and if there is a reason to watch this movie, it's her. The tiptoe by the window scene is great. The way it's shot, the way it's paced, the way they build tension and like to mess with the viewer is a lot of fun. It almost feels like this one individual scene started out as a concept for a short film that then got turned into a full-length feature. I also really liked how this movie played with shadows and silhouettes. There's some really cool visuals in this movie, even if it doesn't necessarily deliver on the scares. Outside of those elements though, this movie is rough. Outside of Rose Byrne's character, I didn't really care about anyone in this family whatsoever, and it's not like her character is all that well written to begin with. Her performance is just strong enough to elevate the material. And outside of the tiptoe scene, the horror elements of this movie really fell flat for me. This feels like just another generic Blumhouse jump scare fest, which are always lazy and ineffective. Once you get to the second half of this movie, where it leans heavily into the supernatural elements, it feels downright silly at times. So when the credits did finally roll on this movie, I began to immediately feel the dread of having to watch 4 more of these movies, 5 if we're counting the one that comes out later this week. I'm gonna be giving the first Insidious a 4.5 out of 10. Insidious Chapter 2 is the same shit all over again, except this time it's worse. Insidious 2 picks up right after the events of Insidious 1. The Lambert family is still dealing with the evil entities they hired Elise and her crew to get rid of, and yeah, shenanigans ensue. This is the kind of sequel that is made purely for the money. You cannot tell me that this is a story that they were wanting to tell, because it is just a lazy retread of everything that came before. It doesn't expand upon the world or the lore in any interesting or meaningful ways. But to make matters even worse, for some godforsaken reason, they decided to sideline Rose Byrne's character in this movie and instead stick us with Josh, who is just such an insufferable asshole. And this movie, we get his backstory. Yay! As much as I like Patrick Wilson and I've really enjoyed his performances in other movies, I would even say his performance in these films are fine. The Josh character just really isn't that interesting. These 2 movies did not win me over on him whatsoever. Not to mention, this movie commits the sin of over-explaining things that really didn't need explanations, and so it removes any of the mystery or tension of the Insidious films. This movie is just straight up buns. I'm gonna be giving Insidious Chapter 2 a 2.5 out of 10. I gotta admit, I was so relieved that Insidious Chapter 3 was a competent movie. It's not great, but it's definitely not bad either. I'll admit, I was relieved that Insidious Chapter 3 was at least a competent movie. It's not great, but I did find some level of enjoyment to be had here. Insidious Chapter 3 is a prequel that takes place 3 years before the events of the first Insidious film. It follows Quinn, a teenager who recently lost her mother, and goes to Elise's character in hopes of being able to communicate with her recently deceased mom. When Elise turns Quinn away, it doesn't take much longer before Quinn is attacked by an evil entity that ends up leaving her wheelchair bound. This movie does a good job at establishing its characters. They lay the groundworks for what you can expect from this family dynamic, and I actually found myself caring about the characters, at least to some extent, something I didn't get out of the previous 2 movies. Stephanie Scott is really good as Quinn. She actually gives a performance that allows this movie to feel like it has some heart to it, and you can feel the loss of her mother and how it is impacting her character in her day-to-day life. Lynn Shay is also given the opportunity to actually flesh out out Elise as a character and make her significantly more interesting than she ever was in the previous two projects. The film actually explores her backstory a little bit and manages to take a character I didn't really care about before and actually like them by the end of this movie. Leigh Whannell's direction is effective. The way he utilizes horror elements in this movie feels way more impactful than anything we got out of the prior two films. The choice of having the main character stuck in a wheelchair, unable to defend herself or run away while all of this freaky shit is happening around her is a very clever choice that actually makes for some really good tension building. While I enjoyed the first two acts of this movie, sadly it did kind of fall apart for me in the third act. Once again, it falls into the trap of feeling like a formulaic rehash of the previous two entries, except this time I didn't feel any of the stakes because this is a prequel and we know Elise is just fine by the end of this. It also sadly devolves into just being jump scares galore, despite the first hour of this movie doing such a good job with its horror elements, and I thought that was really disappointing. While the ending sucks, it by no means is a bad movie. I just wish I could say it was a good one. I'm going to be giving Insidious Chapter 3 a 5.5 out of 10. Insidious: The Last Key opens up with a 16-minute dream sequence. A 16-minute dream sequence that reveals the backstory of what happened to Elise's family when she was a kid. And it was at this point that I knew I needed to buckle up for this inevitable shit show because I could just tell that this was going to be more Blumhouse slop. In Insidious 4, Elise receives a phone call from a man asking her to come on by and clean up some ghost at his house. But when the man gives her the address for his place, Elise quickly realizes that it is the same address of her childhood home where she unleashed an evil demon. So Elise takes the job to go back and clean up her mess that she left behind. Surprise, surprise, this movie feels like every other one of these damn Insidious movies. It follows the same formula, it has all of the same issues, it is more of the same. Lynn Shay is alright as Elise, she's not really given much to do here, but she is the best character in the movie. The direction is really underwhelming, the movie doesn't have any personality or style to it, it feels soulless. And like the second movie in this series, the choice of having flashbacks throughout the film that are meant to focus on Elise's origin story doesn't add anything to the movie or this universe. It just feels half-assed and lazy. Which is a shame because I feel like the last movie in this series actually went out of its way to make Elise one of the more interesting characters in this universe. But oh well, I guess. I'm giving Insidious: The Last Key a 3.5 out of 10. Why? Why did we need this? Insidious: The Red Door has decided to show the aftermath of the events of Insidious Chapter 2. Josh and his son Dalton are hypnotized so they can have their memory wiped of the events that took place in the first two movies. Then we get a time jump to 9 years later with Dalton going off to college and Josh agreeing to drive him there and to help get him all set up. One thing leads to another and both Josh and Dalton decide that their memories a bit shaky and they don't really remember anything from that year that Dalton was in a coma. So they decide to do some digging around and try to get to the bottom of the truth of what happened here. Basically, this entire movie is designed to remind us of the events that took place within the worst Insidious movie. This has no reason to exist. We don't need this. I don't want to remember Insidious Chapter 2. Patrick Wilson is the director this time around, and I do feel like he actually brought something to the table here. Josh isn't as insufferable this time around, and the movie actually breaks out of the generic Insidious formula by focusing on these two characters trying to get reacquainted with their new lives. Josh is a divorced dad because his wife was smart enough to leave his ass, and Dalton is trying to pursue the goal of becoming an artist. So with all that being the case, this is one of the more watchable Insidious movies, but it still sucks ass. The horror elements are tired and predictable, and it really doesn't help that the premise is centered around two characters trying to remember a terrible movie that we really didn't need. I'm giving the fifth Insidious movie a 4 out of 10. And there are my quick, bite-sized thoughts on each of the 5 Insidious movies before Insidious Out of the Further or Into the Further, or just Insidious 6 comes out this Friday. In the meantime, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And what are your thoughts on the Insidious franchise? I'd love to know.